Right? You've met this guy before. Hell, you probably know him intimately. He's got this magnetic energy, these grand visions that light up his entire face when he talks about them. His eyes sparkle with the promise of something extraordinary, something that's going to change everything. He talks endlessly about his next big project, his revolutionary idea, his masterpiece that's always just around the corner. But here's the thing that's eating at you. Nothing ever happens. Absolutely nothing. He lives in this perpetual state of about to, but never actually does. There's always an excuse, always a reason why this time wasn't right. The timing was off. People didn't understand his vision. The world wasn't ready for his genius. Sound familiar? Maybe it's that friend from college who's still working on his novel 15 years later. Maybe it's your brother who jumps from one get-rich-quick scheme to another. Maybe it's the guy you're dating, the one who talks about commitment but vanishes the moment things get real. Or maybe, and this might sting a little, maybe you're looking in the mirror right now. What you're witnessing isn't just immaturity. It's not just someone who needs to get their act together. You're staring at one of the most fascinating and destructive psychological patterns known to humanity. Carl Jung called it the puer eternus, the eternal boy. And once you understand this archetype, you'll never look at these men the same way again. If you're ready to dive deep into the psychology behind this pattern, hit that subscribe button right now. Trust me, what you're about to discover will change how you see relationships, ambition, and maybe even yourself. This isn't just another self-help video. This is about understanding the invisible forces that keep grown men trapped in emotional childhood. Let me paint you a picture that'll make your skin crawl with recognition. The puer eternus is that guy who's always preparing to live but never actually starts living. He's like an actor who's been rehearsing for the same play for 20 years but never steps onto the actual stage. He enchants you with his youthful energy, his raw creativity, his spontaneous spirit that makes ordinary life feel suffocating by comparison. But beneath that charming exterior lies something sinister. This man expects life to bend to his will. He wants others to solve the problems he refuses to face. He's constantly searching for the perfect woman, the perfect job, the perfect moment when everything will magically align with his fantasies. And when reality dares to contradict his dreams, he runs, he disappears, he gives up and retreats back into his cocoon of unfulfilled potential. Here's what makes this pattern so insidious. The puer eternus genuinely believes he's too special for ordinary life. He sees routine as death, commitment as prison, responsibility as betrayal of his authentic self. But what he's really doing is hiding behind a sophisticated defense mechanism. He's paralyzed by the terror of failure, of disappointment, of discovering that maybe he's not as special as he thought. If you've ever tried to help someone like this, you know exactly how soul-crushing it is. You find yourself giving advice that falls on deaf ears, offering support that gets wasted, trying to pull someone forward who deep down doesn't want to move. And here's the cruelest part of all, he makes you feel guilty about it. Suddenly you're the problem for expecting too much, for wanting him to grow up, for not accepting his eternal state of almost. But I'm going to tell you something that might be hard to hear. This man is trapped in a prison of his own making. He thinks he's free, but he's actually enslaved by fear and emotional immaturity. And if he doesn't wake up soon, he's going to grow old without ever having truly lived. Now, before you think this is some kind of attack on men who dream big or value creativity, let me be crystal clear. This isn't about crushing anyone's spirit. This is about holding up a mirror to a pattern that destroys lives, ruins relationships, and wastes human potential on a massive scale. Because here's the truth that nobody wants to acknowledge. The puer eternus isn't just hurting himself. He's slowly destroying everyone who cares about him. The eternal boy archetype runs deeper than you might imagine. It's not just a personality quirk or a phase someone goes through. It's a fundamental psychological pattern that Jung observed across cultures, throughout history, in myths and real life alike. The puer appears in stories as the eternal youth who refuses to leave paradise, who won't descend from the mountaintop, who lives forever in the realm of gods and dreams. In psychological terms, he's the man who refuses to leave the psychic womb of childhood, where everything was taken care of, where he was protected from the harsh realities of the world. He remains the eternal son, the chosen one, the special being who's destined for greatness but somehow never quite gets there. You've seen this up close, haven't you? Men who hop from job to job, always searching for something more meaningful, something that matches their grandiose self-image. They start projects with explosive enthusiasm, but abandon them the moment they hit their first real obstacle. They fall in love with devastating intensity, but vanish as soon as the relationship requires actual work, actual commitment, actual maturity. And it's not because they lack intelligence or talent. That's what makes this so frustrating. The puer eternus is often brilliant, sensitive, overflowing with potential. He has this incredible connection to creativity, inspiration, and imagination that can be absolutely intoxicating. But that's exactly the problem. He lives entirely in the realm of ideas and possibilities, completely disconnected from the weight and demands of reality. He wants to soar without building wings. He wants love without commitment. He wants success without effort. He wants all the rewards of adulthood without paying the price of maturity. And when the world doesn't deliver this fantasy, he doesn't look inward. He blames everything and everyone else. The system is corrupt. His parents didn't understand him. Society is too rigid. Life is unfair. But never, ever does he blame himself. Jung made a crucial observation about the puer eternus that explains so much of his behavior. He suffers from a complete disconnection with time. He's always living in not now, always waiting for something to happen first, the right opportunity, the right person, the right phase of his life. He exists in the when but never in the today. And because of this temporal displacement, he doesn't actually live. He just survives, feeding off dreams that eventually become burdens. But here's where it gets really interesting. The puer eternus does carry something valuable, something that can't be dismissed. He embodies inner youth, creative imagination, the ability to see life with fresh eyes and reinvent possibilities. The problem isn't that he has a boy inside him. The problem is when that boy takes complete control of his existence, when the child becomes the dictator of his entire life. This is exactly what we need to understand as we go deeper. When does the light of the puer begin to darken? When does his charm transform into destruction? Because there's a shadow side to this archetype that's far more sinister than most people realize. There's something undeniably magnetic about a man dominated by the puer eternus energy. He radiates this lightness, this spontaneity that feels like a breath of fresh air in a world suffocated by routine and obligation. He speaks like a poet, dreams like a visionary, and moves through life as if he's operating by different rules than everyone else. He doesn't follow conventional paths. He doesn't accept societal labels. He doesn't cling to anything or anyone. And for many people, this feels like freedom in its purest form. Who wouldn't want that kind of liberation in a world where most of us feel trapped by endless responsibilities and empty routines? The puer eternus seems to have cracked the code, figured out how to live authentically while everyone else is sleepwalking through their obligations. But here's where the trap reveals itself. This freedom is nothing more than an elaborate illusion, a carefully constructed facade designed to hide what terrifies him most: reality itself. The puer eternus isn't free. He's running. He's fleeing from pain, from failure, from rejection, from frustration, from the relentless passage of time. He's escaping the weight of being responsible for his own life. Every choice he avoids, Every decision he postpones, every responsibility he transfers to someone else deepens his prison. It's a prison disguised as autonomy, but it's still a prison, and the bars are made of fear. You've witnessed this firsthand. He claims he doesn't want a conventional job because he was born for something greater, something more meaningful. But scratch beneath the surface and you'll find he's absolutely terrified of routine, of hierarchy, of commitment, of the possibility that he might actually be ordinary. He talks about not wanting to tie himself down to anyone because relationships are prisons that kill the soul. But the reality is he's deathly afraid of surrendering, of being truly seen, of being held accountable by another human being. He rails against rules and systems, claiming they're designed to crush the human spirit. But deep down, he simply doesn't know how to deal with limits, boundaries, or structure. This freedom he's constantly selling to others and to himself is actually a childish refusal to engage with the complexity and difficulty of adult life. The puer eternus wants to remain eternal, light, unblemished by the messiness of real existence. To maintain this illusion, he needs to stay in constant motion, always moving, always changing, always onto the next thing before the current thing can demand too much from him. He's like a balloon drifting in the wind, seemingly free, but actually at the mercy of forces beyond his control. But time doesn't negotiate. The real world doesn't care about his fantasies. And sooner or later, life demands payment for all the bills he's been dodging. Jung observed that the puer eternus lives in permanent suspension, always floating between heaven and earth. He refuses to descend, refuses to plant roots, refuses to deal with concrete reality. But without roots, nothing grows. Without effort, nothing flourishes. Without engaging with difficulty and pain, there's no real transformation. True freedom isn't the absence of limits or responsibilities. True freedom is having enough internal structure and strength to consciously choose what deserves your commitment, your energy, your life force. But the puer eternus doesn't choose. He escapes, and in this constant escape, he doesn't just sabotage his own potential. He gradually destroys everyone who tries to love him. And this brings us to the shadow, the dark underbelly of this archetype that most people never see coming until it's too late. In the beginning, everything feels magical. The puer eternus shines with an energy that attracts, inspires, and completely envelops you. He's passionate beyond measure, enthusiastic about everything, beautifully unpredictable in ways that make life feel like an adventure. You feel chosen, special, like you've discovered this incredible secret that everyone else is missing. But time has a way of revealing truth. That initial shine begins to dim. What felt like lightness starts to feel like absence. What seemed like sensitivity reveals itself as instability. And what you thought was freedom shows itself to be elaborate escape artistry. This is when the shadow of the puer eternus begins to emerge from behind the curtain, and it's sneaky. It doesn't announce itself with dramatic gestures or obvious failures. Instead, it manifests through 1,000 small sabotages, tiny daily destructions that accumulate over time like poison in the bloodstream. He starts forgetting commitments, missing deadlines, becoming financially disorganized in ways that somehow always affect other people. He changes his mind abruptly about important decisions. He breaks promises, but always with poetic explanations that make you feel guilty for being disappointed. I'm not ready for this level of intensity. I don't want to force something that should flow naturally. I need space to figure out who I really am. But underneath all this beautiful language lies a harsher truth. He's afraid, terrified of growing up, of making mistakes, of being judged, of discovering that he might be ordinary after all. So he unconsciously sabotages anything that requires him to step into adult responsibility. This self-sabotage creates ripple effects that devastate everyone in his orbit. Romantic partners find themselves living in a constant state of emotional whiplash, loving a man who seems incredible in theory but absent in practice. He says he loves you, then disappears for days without explanation. He talks about building a future together but never takes concrete steps to make it happen. He makes you feel like the most important person in his world, then treats you like you're optional. Family members watch in frustration as he wastes obvious talent, intelligence, and opportunities that others would kill for. They see him self-destruct again and again, always with the same patterns, always with the same excuses, always leaving others to clean up the emotional and practical wreckage. Friends gradually become exhausted by the cycle. They offer support that gets wasted, give advice that gets ignored, invest in someone who seems incapable of moving forward. They find themselves trapped in this suffocating dynamic, where they're constantly trying to help someone who lives in perpetual emotional adolescence. Behind all of this lies a feeling that's hard to name but impossible to ignore. You start to realize that he's not just stuck, he's actively choosing to remain stuck. He's unconsciously committed to his own stagnation, and he'll sabotage anyone who threatens to pull him out of it. Like every archetype, the shadow of the puer eternus feeds on unconscious energy. He genuinely doesn't realize that he's destroying himself and everyone around him. Worse than that, he's convinced that other people are the problem. The world is too boring, too rigid, too controlling. People who have matured are traitors to authenticity and freedom. Society is designed to crush creative spirits like his. So he isolates himself more and more, believing he's being true to his essence when he's actually enslaving himself to fear. He creates elaborate philosophical justifications for his behavior, turning his limitations into virtues and his cowardice into enlightenment. Jung had something profound to say about this. He observed that we don't become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making our darkness conscious. The shadow of the puer eternus isn't something to be denied or suppressed. It needs to be faced, acknowledged, and integrated. The problem isn't that he carries the child within him. Every healthy adult needs access to that childlike energy, creativity, and wonder. The problem emerges when that inner child becomes a tyrant, sabotaging every opportunity to live a full and meaningful life. And here's what makes this pattern so persistent and destructive. The puer eternus is rarely operating alone. Behind him, there's almost always a silent presence that enables his behavior and perpetuates his imprisonment. Jung called this figure the archetypal mother, and understanding her role is crucial to grasping why some men never grow up. No puer eternus emerges from a vacuum. Behind almost every man who refuses to mature, there's a figure, sometimes loving, sometimes suffocating, who protects him from the world while simultaneously preventing him from engaging with it. In Carl Jung's analytical psychology, this is the archetypal mother. When her presence becomes excessive and unhealthy, she transforms into what Jung called the devouring great mother, the one who gives life but also traps it. This mother figure can be literal, an actual overprotective mother who did everything for her son, who never allowed him to make mistakes, who always cushioned his falls but unconsciously prevented him from developing the strength and resilience that comes from facing consequences. She meant well, but she created a psychological dependency that extends far beyond childhood. Or this mother can be symbolic, a romantic partner who takes on the caregiver role, treating him like a child who needs to be managed rather than a man who needs to be challenged. A grandmother who spoiled him beyond reason. Any feminine figure in his life who protects, nourishes, and embraces without ever demanding growth in return. The puer eternus then becomes a man who seeks in women not partners, but mother substitutes. He's looking for someone who will understand him without demanding explanation, accept him without requiring change, support him without setting boundaries. He wants the comfort of maternal love without any of the reciprocal responsibilities of adult relationship. This creates a symbiotic dynamic that feels comfortable but is profoundly destructive. As long as he's being taken care of, he doesn't need to develop his own capabilities. He doesn't need to make difficult decisions. He doesn't need to face the challenges that force psychological growth. He can remain in a state of eternal emotional childhood, expecting the women in his life to resolve what he refuses to confront. The archetypal mother often gets trapped in this dynamic as well. She believes she's helping, that she's showing love and support, but she's actually feeding a cycle of psychological dependency that drains the life force from both people involved. She becomes exhausted by constantly managing his emotional and practical needs, while he becomes increasingly helpless and resentful. Jung was brutally clear about this pattern. He said the greatest tragedy occurs when the mother refuses to let the child be born psychologically. This means that even though the body ages, the psyche remains immature, childlike, waiting for comfort instead of seeking strength and independence. This dynamic becomes even more destructive when the puer eternus enters romantic relationships. He falls in love quickly and intensely, but he's not really falling in love with a person. He's falling in love with his projection of the perfect mother disguised as a lover. He places impossible expectations on his partner, expecting her to fill all the internal voids he refuses to acknowledge in himself. He wants her to be endlessly understanding, infinitely patient, constantly supportive, never demanding. He wants her to provide emotional regulation, practical management, and unconditional acceptance, while he continues to live in the realm of dreams and possibilities. He wants a mother, not a partner. As soon as the relationship begins to require depth, reciprocity, or genuine commitment, he starts to panic. The woman becomes too demanding, too controlling, too serious. She's trying to trap him, to kill his free spirit, to turn him into something conventional and boring. So he creates distance, sabotages the connection, or simply disappears. But here's what's really happening beneath the surface. He never wanted an equal partner in the first place. He wanted someone to take care of him while making him feel like a man. When she inevitably fails to meet these impossible expectations, because no adult woman should be expected to mother a grown man, he blames her for the failure of the relationship. Breaking free from this pattern requires something most puer eternus men will do almost anything to avoid. It requires pain. It requires the symbolic death of the child self. It requires cutting the psychological umbilical cord that keeps him tethered to eternal childhood. But this rupture, as painful as it is, initiates the true process of individuation. It's the beginning of becoming a real person rather than a collection of potentials and fantasies. Growing up hurts, but not growing up hurts more. It hurts everyone involved. And this brings us to the crucial question. How does a man trapped in the puer eternus pattern finally break free? How does he stop running from reality and start building something real? Because transformation is possible, but it requires facing truths that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. There comes a moment in every puer eternus journey when the mask begins to slip. The unfulfilled dreams start to feel heavy instead of inspiring. The failed relationships leave scars that won't heal with new fantasies. The endless possibilities that once felt liberating begin to feel like a prison of indecision. Life, which once seemed infinitely open, starts to narrow with each passing year. It's at this moment that the man living under the dominion of the eternal boy is forced to look in the mirror and ask a question that cuts to the bone. How long can I keep living as if I have forever? This is what Jung called the breaking point. The moment when the pain of remaining immature becomes greater than the terror of growing up. But anyone who thinks maturation is a gentle, gradual process is living in their own fantasy. Jung didn't sugarcoat this reality. He described individuation, the process by which a person becomes truly themselves as a psychological birth. And like any birth, it involves pain, struggle, and symbolic death. The first step in this transformation requires something that the puer eternus has spent his entire life avoiding: the complete collapse of fantasy. He must come to terms with the reality that life will not wait for him to feel ready. There is no perfect moment. No one is coming to save him. The world is not hostile, but it's also not going to rearrange itself to accommodate his dreams. He has to recognize that growing up is not a betrayal of his authentic self. It's the only way to build an authentic self. But before he can construct anything real, he must first mourn everything that was never real. This mourning process is brutal and necessary. He must grieve the idealized version of himself that never materialized. He must mourn the perfect life he imagined but never created. He must say goodbye to the promises he made but never fulfilled. And most painfully, he must kill the symbolic mother, not the actual person, but the psychological dependency that kept him infantile. Killing the boy within doesn't mean destroying creativity, spontaneity, or the capacity for wonder. It means no longer using that boy as an excuse to escape from reality. It means allowing the child energy to exist, but under the leadership of a mature, developed adult self. Maturity requires things that feel like death to the puer eternus. It requires construction instead of constant deconstruction, structure instead of endless flexibility, consistency instead of perpetual reinvention. It means saying no when it would be easier to say yes, committing when every instinct screams to run, working with focus when inspiration is nowhere to be found, being present in relationships even after the initial magic has faded. It means trading the intoxicating high of endless newness for the transformative power of continuity. And this might be the hardest lesson of all for someone who has built his entire identity around change and possibility. But here's where the real magic happens. When the puer eternus energy is integrated into a mature adult psyche, it doesn't disappear. It transforms. The creativity remains but becomes channeled into real projects that actually get completed. The vision remains but becomes grounded in practical steps and concrete actions. The spontaneity remains but operates within a framework of responsibility and commitment. This is true rebirth. When the eternal boy stops fleeing from reality and begins building with it. When dreams become plans and plans become reality. When potential finally transforms into achievement. But this process doesn't happen automatically, and it doesn't happen without help. Many men reach this crisis point and feel completely lost. They know they need to change. They can feel the urgency of time passing. But they don't know how to start. They don't know how to build the internal structure they've spent their entire lives avoiding. This is where the real work begins, because understanding the problem is only the first step. The second step is having the courage to do something about it, even when you don't know what you're doing, even when every instinct tells you to run. If you've made it this far in this exploration, it's because something deep inside you recognizes the truth of what's being said. Maybe you've seen this pattern in someone you care about. Maybe you've seen it in yourself and you're finally ready to admit it. And if that's the case, there's no shame in that recognition. None whatsoever. We all carry aspects of the eternal child within us. We've all been tempted to avoid responsibility, to dream instead of act, to hope that life will offer us comfort before we're ready to face its challenges. This is part of the human condition. The difference is what we choose to do with that recognition. The truth is both simple and brutal. Life doesn't wait for us to feel ready. It doesn't pause while we figure ourselves out. It moves forward with or without our participation, and every day we spend avoiding reality is a day we can never get back. Carl Jung observed that people who don't confront their own demons will be condemned to meet them at every turn. The puer eternus is one of those demons. It hides behind beautiful words like freedom, authenticity, and misunderstood genius. But in practice, it corrodes your foundation and prevents any solid construction. This pattern will not resolve itself. It will not disappear because you want it to or because you finally understand it intellectually. You have to actively choose to be bigger than it. You have to decide that your potential is too valuable to waste on endless preparation for a life you never start living. Maturity is what emerges when you stop waiting for someone to save you and start saving yourself. When you understand that responsibility isn't a prison, it's a pathway to real power. When you realize that authentic freedom doesn't come from doing whatever you want, but from having enough internal strength and structure to choose what's necessary, even when it's difficult. The puer eternus wants to remain a beautiful possibility forever, but possibilities that never become reality are just sophisticated forms of self-deception. At some point, you have to choose substance over potential, construction over destruction, presence over escape. And that choice, that fundamental decision to engage with reality instead of fleeing from it, is what transforms boys into men, dreams into achievements, and potential into power. It's what allows you to finally stop preparing to live and start actually living. But this transformation requires one more crucial element that we haven't fully explored yet. It requires understanding not just what needs to change, but how to actually make that change sustainable. Because knowledge without action is just another form of sophisticated procrastination. The journey from eternal boy to mature man isn't just about individual psychology. It's about fundamentally restructuring how you relate to time, commitment, difficulty, and other people. It's about building new neural pathways, new habits, new ways of being that can withstand the gravitational pull of old patterns. This is where the rubber meets the road, where understanding becomes transformation, where the real work begins.